Sylva Nielsen fights against an imaginary opponent, but the real one overcomes imagination. Michael Caine, in trying to attain the approval of people, makes his body malfunction. Blood Falcon likes to see himself as he is seen by others, and loses control of his environment, gets lost in the image. This loss of control makes him adopt a more feminine gender role. John Tanaka lives in a fantasy which depends on Jodie Summer liking him. When she doesn't, his fantasy world falters and reveals itself to be a roll of film, a visual on a screen. Drac follows the same theme of living in a fantasy on a screen, but here explicitly the fantasy is what's happening in the video game, F-Zero. Roger Buster is distracted from reality, but what distracts him is his intent focus on driving his fast vehicle. He is not concerned with where he's driving, but just the pure experience of moving forward. His truck is decorated with the image of a woman. The theme of stars, present in many of the videos before, continues. His delivery company is called Star Express. He can't deliver his parcel because the house he's delivering it at is broken by his very act of delivering it. So both femininity and masculinity are portrayed as heavenly, ethereal ideals. However, men never attain it. They are always a bit of both, a bit masculine, what they want people to see, and a bit feminine, what they want to hide and not allow people to see. But women are not portrayed as being a bit of both. They are entirely feminine, entirely ideal, mind stuff. So we have three components here. Real people trying to become masculine, and idealized people embodying femininity. The only real people shown, then, according to this logic, are the people trying to be men. So if masculinity is an ideal in their heads, could femininity also be an ideal in their heads? Could the dreaming ego who is dreaming these videos be, so to speak, identified with the masculine gender? That is why the only subjects for the viewer to identify with are men, whereas women are, instead of subjects, objects. When men almost attain full masculinity, it breaks down, because if they did, they would become ideals, and ideals are being shown by these movies to be things the subject can't ever attain. They are objects of admiration, idols to be worshipped. If the men in these videos were to perform their masculinity without any impediments, it would imply the observer of the videos is enjoying not just identifying with them, but enjoying observing realized masculinity itself as an object. Deriving pleasure from the observation of the masculine itself. And if the subject were to objectify masculinity as something out there, it would mean the subject is not entirely masculine, since it has defined masculinity as that which is strong and in control and objectifies others, but not as something that is objectified by others. That is, something that adopts a passive role. If the masculine ideal were fully realized, it would become an object which the subject would have to contend with. The subject of these movies identifies with the masculine, so if the masculine were to be stripped away from it, it would feel like it's dying. Paradoxically, the subject deals with this by pretending that masculinity can never be realized. It pretends the reasons it can't attain it are circumstantial. Small little annoyances and blunders, instead of it being a root impossibility to embody an ideal. Dr. Clash is in an ideal state. A small annoyance enters this ideal. It doesn't conform to the ideal, so he tries to swat it out. By trying to do so, he swats himself out of the fantasy. Black Shadow is living a fantasy. However, he keeps making mistakes and bloopers. He, however, is content with this and aware that it's a fantasy. Don Genie is living a fantasy where he is very strong and scary. However, something interrupts his fantasy and shows a side of him that isn't. Digiboy is not physically strong, but he becomes strong thanks to technology as an extension of his body. Dai Sangen are strong, but not too strong. They're sometimes a bit foolish. The whole extension of technology theme suggests the male characters are unsatisfied with what they can do and try to do more things. They want to do things they can't do now. So they want power. They want to be strong. But they can't. This strength always breaks down. It fails. It can't be fully attained because it's an ideal. So this failure leaves them wanting to attain the ideal. They're not satisfied. They aren't content with just being. They want to do. They want to reach goals. But what's funny then is that masculinity itself seems to be a role characterized by the attaining of goals, by the search for power to do things you couldn't do before. Those things you couldn't do before, you had thought of doing or planned to do. Octoman wants to attain a state it knows lies in the future, a state that only exists in the mind. Once he has attained it, he will be a real man. However, that state was an ideal state. And if masculinity is about having power to materialize ideal states in the future, then he wouldn't have been a man by reaching that goal, because that goal would be less powerful than an ideal even beyond it. So masculinity can't be attained, because masculinity is the attaining of goals, and there are always goals to attain. Spade cooks up a magic spell, and it transforms into a meal to strengthen his body. Daigoro is a child, but presents himself as more aggressive than his father and more lustful towards women than him. Lily performs the same skit as Antonio Gusta and Blood Falcon. However, as a difference, when her clothes come out, she isn't embarrassed by them. BJ, I have no idea. He drives very fast and stops in front of the pyramids as a UFO flies past. He himself looks like a typical sci-fi alien, so maybe he stops by the UFO as a sign of having reached home. QQQ is attacked by a beast, but he transcends it. The prey kills the predator. In Dr. Clash, the predator becomes the prey, as happens to Biorex. Phoenix lives a fantasy of seriousness, but it appears to be more childlike than it seemed. Deathborn is watching a screen that shows his masculine exploits. Like Black Shadow, the nature of his filminess is exposed. Deathborn wants everything to be dead. That's his goal. Black Shadow, who works for Deathborn, works for those goals too. Both of them have videos that clearly show them at ease with the fact that their masculinity is a film.